Nice to see you. Anyone got anything they want to share? Testify to? Ask about?
I used to live in Venezuela for a few years, and when the Seven Mountains theory or whatever came out by Lance Walnew, most of the churches jumped on that with little or no success, I'd say, because I don't think people realize that first we need to take control of the spiritual aspects of the mountains, be sitting on those mountains before we can translate it into the physical mountains. For example, even here in the UK, we have the Christian Alliance, who has been participating in local elections, councillors and so on. No success. I don't think there will be any success unless they understand the process of taking control of the spiritual control. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I personally feel that God does not want us to try and redeem man-made mountains. Those 7 mountains that are seen in culture, that is obviously very well recognized nowadays. Who made those? And I think that's the question. If God didn't establish them, but they were created by man to bring a worldly governmental system into place, then God doesn't want us to redeem them. He wants us to establish his mountain, which is the mountain of the house of the Lord. And then all the other hills, it says, because hills are what they are in comparison with God's mountain, will come and look to the true mountain, the true authority of God's kingdom, because we will have the answers, because we'll be operating, as you say, from a heavenly perspective, but actually manifesting that on the earth, in whatever you're going to call what it looks like, embassies of heaven, ecclesia, but we will be operating from the authority of the mountain of the house of the Lord. I personally feel it's a waste of time trying to redeem something that's going to fail anyway. And I believe, again, when God releases revelation, man often gets hold of it and tries to interpret it from his perspective. And it panders to, I believe, the pathway of the knowledge of good and evil to try and redeem something which was created on the wrong path anyway. So I really don't have any desire to try and redeem something which is going to fail. I'd rather actually establish something which is going to succeed, and then see all those things that are failing come, the people who are involved in those, when they realize that it's not meeting their expectations or changing things, to come to us to get the answers. Now, in the transition period, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be involved in bringing light into those areas or demonstrating the kingdom through our own lives in those areas. I'm not saying we just abandon them, but I believe the kingdom purpose is to establish something from heaven that comes from a heavenly blueprint and a heavenly mandate, and I don't believe that those 7 mountains do. You could say, if you look biblically, you could say, yes, God has established certain things, family and other things within the Word of God, absolutely. But I don't believe that what is around in culture is necessarily a reflection of that. So I think we need to be careful that we don't put our energy in the wrong place. But everyone has a personal mandate and a personal blueprint, and some people's mandates may well be to work, to engage in the workplace, or to engage in government or any other areas, as individuals. But that's a huge difference between setting up a structure which really tries to get the whole of the church to engage those areas rather than individuals. And certain churches or ecclesias may have specific mandates or mountains attached to them which enables them to engage in certain things, and I think that's absolutely valid. I just think we need to make sure we have a heavenly mandate for whatever we do. And whatever we do absolutely definitely need to establish the government in heaven first before we can actually see that begin to change things on the earth. And if we're going to establish the government in the heavens first, then we have to deal with the atmosphere. And that's what sits between heaven and earth. And we need to establish in that atmosphere that which is the true principalities, thrones, rulers, powers, rather than the false ones that are sitting there at the moment. Yeah.
Hi, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
The last time we stepped into court, I got a law on animal welfare, in particular abandonment. I was quite perplexed because I wouldn't count myself to be an animal person, really. I love to see them on television, but that's it, not more than that. So I felt a bit, I really didn't know what to do. I was like, animal welfare. Dogs, I don't even touch them, so I don't know what I'll do with it.
Again, I mean, it's you just need to make sure you know what that means. What does animal welfare mean from the perspective of your personal mandate or anything you're to do with? It's very clear that we have a sonship mandate to rule over those things that are on the earth, and to rule responsibly always means to bring a blessing into it. And I think there's a right and correct balance that needs to be found in that. I mean, a lot of people, who get into vegetarianism and veganism and stuff, and it's like, oh, because we treat the animals really badly, and that sort of thing. I can understand and sympathize with that position in a sense, because I like animals and I wouldn't want animals to be treated really badly. But we wouldn't have any domesticated animals if they didn't serve a purpose. Particularly, we wouldn't have any livestock or sheep, sheep, goats, and cows and those things if they didn't serve a purpose. They would have died out. We have domesticated them in the sense, and we use them for food. If we didn't use them for food or for leather or other things, then they wouldn't exist in the numbers they do, obviously. So God has created the world for man. He hasn't created man for the world. So the world should serve, and therefore we need to rule. So we need to find out, what does it mean to rule in the animal kingdom? We're not the top of the food chain in the animal kingdom, because we're created separately from the animal kingdom in a completely different way. So I believe it's important to understand what our role is in those type of things, because they can become very emotive subjects. And you can get people who are very passionate about animal welfare, but they aren't even interested in people. Now, I think people always come first. For me, God created us in His image, and as sons, His love for us far exceeds, anything else. And we need to reflect that in how we look at the world. And there's a lot of people suffering out there. Whether through various things that are happening, sickness, disease, trafficking, all sorts of different things, prejudice, massive amounts of things going on in the world, which, we need to ensure that we're looking to bring God's government into. Again, some people may well have mandates to do things within the thing of bringing rule into the animals, and the things that are on the earth, and in the future, who knows what that might be. But certainly, if you feel called to something there, or if you don't feel called to it, but God is showing you something, some of that would be, is that for you, or is that to call for others to come into their positions of government? And some of that I don't assume that whenever I see something legislative or something which is an authorization that it always belongs to me, even if I have some responsibility in releasing it. And I often call people into positions of government which aren't mine, because I have a mandate to call for government and to call for people to come into their mountains and their positions of authority in the heavens and to outwork that on the earth in that way. So I think in a lot of these situations it's really, really important to get a clarity of exactly what God is saying. And so I wouldn't do anything unless I was clear and sure. Yeah. Because otherwise you can just go off, oh, animal welfare, oh, that means this. Well, if you just got the words animal welfare, that could mean anything, you know, to do with that. And I think that's where we just have to ensure we go back, making sure that we've heard God clearly, that we have a clear mandate understanding of what it means, and then we can then go and administrate that, whatever it is that we're called to outwork. You know, and you know, doing an odd court case for something because God shows you something is very different from having a ongoing specific mandate that is really part of your destiny and actually really moves you. And it's interesting that you would say, well, I'm not really an animal person. I mean, that to me is a real clue, because often the desires of our heart and God's destiny comes out in some of our personal preferences and things that we like in this realm. So it may well be that God is showing you something which may not be your whole destiny or anything like that. I would be surprised if you didn't have some sort of affinity to animals, if that was part of your destiny. But your destiny may well involve doing something, you know, now and again, which involves various things. So just be clear, I think, that you're sure what it means.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
Mike,
Yeah.
I think what Agnes showed a metaphor for where it says the creature groaned for redemption.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these things, when God speaks to us, it is important to understand whether He's using a symbol, whether it's a metaphor for something, whether He's trying to get our attention, and you know, I would never presume and rush off to do something without having a clear strategy. You know, so if God has shown me something, what is the strategy for outworking it? And I find there's the heavenly establishing and government and ruling, and then there's the earthly strategies that we need to outwork certain things. And when they come together, then you get a full picture. You know, but you know, keep going back to God and find, you know, clarifying until you're sure and you're clear what those things mean. You know, if it's a direct thing, yes, it's to do with this, or whether it is some sort of analogy that God is trying to get your attention by using some sort of metaphor or analogy to help you tune into it. Definitely.
Yes. God also aligned me with this charity, St. George's, and it does work very similar to what Freedom Center does. It works with the homeless, and they make food for them as well. So I can now understand why he had me visit you, because it's kind of like a picture,
yeah,
of kind of like where he's called me to do in the line of the homeless. So I feel quite positive about that.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. You know, and you know, when we deal with people who are in that sort of disadvantaged thing, they often have animals. You know, we find a lot of people with addictions and with homeless problems. They have animals. Those animals are company. Those animals are gold. So you may even find that there's a link between working with people and having a way to engage with the animals that they have in a way. So some of those things, you'll find that they're linked, and they may well unveil and open up. The more you pursue it, it becomes clear. We connected with various things. We have things here for people's animals when they're in the center, and we have water and different things that we provide because we're sensitive to it. We used to have all people's animals come into the center, but we find that became a bigger problem when we had more people coming because animals tend to squabble. So we had to put some things in place to keep people safe. But yeah, anyway. Okay. All right. Any other things people you want to ask? No, I'm sure you got something.
Hi, Mike. I just listened this morning to the latest legislation video, and I was interested in you're talking about the court of the upright and talking with the cloud of witnesses, or the men in white linen. Could you say a little bit more about it? We had a court case with some people from the group last Friday, and somebody saw that they were being assigned to our court case. So I witnessed that, but I didn't see it clearly live. Wondered if you could expand on it a little bit.
I feel that the cloud of witnesses, are, according to Hebrews 12, are surrounding us. They are involved. They're active. They want to be more active. They have roles to play in us fulfilling our mandates, and that can be in many different ways. I know people struggle with this whole area. They're dead and you can't talk to the dead and all that sort of stuff. Well, very clearly they're not dead. Their bodies may be dead, but we're not actually digging them up and trying to talk into their bodies. We're engaging their spirit. So, I don't think there's any real issue around that. I think they seem to be very excited recently, I think, because we are beginning to engage legislatively, and we're beginning to take our positions in the heavens, so they see potential fulfillment of things on the earth in a way that hasn't been there for a long time. And so there does seem to be an increased activity. They do seem to be engaging more in activations, and people's encounters in different courts and different things seem to be finding that there are those that are assigned. I think the illustration using the relay race is the best one I can see. That when the race is not complete until the last runner crosses the line, when the first lap is done, let's say it's a 400-meter race, the runner in the first lap passes the baton to the next runner, and then doesn't pack up and go home. Obviously waits to cheer on the next runner, and then the next runner usually joins them, and then they cheer on the next runner until you get to the last runner. So they have invested something in previous generational things, and so they have a vested interest in seeing those things fulfilled. Now, obviously, many of them never pass their batons. That's the problem. God has had to engage something new, because the old sort of order of things wouldn't let go and change. So there's not been that much baton passing, but I think in the spiritual realm they do want to engage and help the generations that are here now to fulfill God's purpose. You know, I think God would have had every generation to pass the baton, and for every generation to go further, and if they'd done that, I think a lot more would have been accomplished, but many generations had to start again from scratch, or face opposition from the previous generations because of fresh revelation and defensiveness over previous revelation and those type of things. And I guess that's why we've got 24,000 odd denominations, Protestant denominations, you know, because of the nature of that, where that revelation. Now, in one sense, I think, you know, what is preferable, you know, the fact that we have the ability to engage ourselves and to find revelation for ourselves, I think that's highly more preferable than potentially the Catholic Church, who has to come through the Pope, who has one person who brings revelation. So although there are 24,000 more denominations, at least all of us have the potential for engaging and having revelation ourselves rather than to go through anybody else. Or, you know, that's the theory anyway. So when you engage the chord of the upright, there are those that may be assigned to your own life, and they recognize your role that you have to play in this generation, and they get alongside. You know, I've gone into the realms of heaven, and they have sought me out. You know, there have been occasions where I've gone and sought certain men in white linen out. Generally, they've engaged with me, and they've been the ones who've been instructing and directing and giving insight and releasing things, which have been very important in my maturing and understanding of the things of the heavens, you know, and how they relate. So I found, you know, engaging with Jacob and Enoch and others have been significant in helping me understand how the government of heaven works and how those things function. We had 12 engage us here as a government, and I encouraged everyone to go and personally engage with them and find out, you know, what they were going to do, you know, what insight they had. When it comes to engaging in court cases, if one gets assigned, I assume that's because they have inside knowledge that can help in the court case. So, for instance, if there is a generational issue that the enemy is using, maybe some of the men in white linen have insight into those generational issues and can be passing information to you to give you, as part of the case, you know, things that you can present to the court. But it's certainly something which is increasing. I definitely have sensed an increase, have seen an increase. We felt comfortable to actually engage the rest of our mountains and our benches here with the men in white linen, and had quite interesting encounters when we engaged that court to find out who are assigned and how they can connect. And I think it's one of those things that will unveil, probably again creating a lot of potential opposition, and you have to be willing to, you know, stand firm, you know, because, you know, you will be accused if you engage with these from the religious systems with engaging with the dead, you know, and, you know, you'll be called being a medium and all those sorts of things. And in reality, obviously that's not true, but you have to be willing to be able to stand firm on what you believe and not be swayed by that or affected by it, or feel the need to get into an argument and defend yourself. You know, you don't get into any political wranglings over these things. You know, if you know what you're doing, do it, you know, and, you know, engage. I think a lot more will open up in the time ahead in terms of what this means, and particularly also with the angelic realm as well, and the canopy of angels, and very much more is there. I think we're just touching, the surface of some of these things really, without having gone into the fullness of what it means and
Yeah.
being able to engage. I think there's more to discover, but let's keep going at it, and let's not get dissuaded by people's negativity towards these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly do feel that there are a lot of mantles out there that do need to be passed. As Elijah went into the realm of heaven, he passed his mantle to Elisha, and Elisha had a double portion of what that mantle, that authority meant. So I do feel that there were mantles that were never passed. And you can see the result of some of the mantles that were passed in the ministry that certain people have. I think Reinhard Bonnke would be a classic example of that, having engaged with George Jeffreys on the day or the day before George Jeffreys died, and he passed his mantle to him. And that man has had a significant impact in reaching millions with the good news, because I think he had a mantle that was given to him from another generation, and it was, an increase. It was a multiplication. So definitely something which I believe Satan's trophy room has a lot of mantles in it, because they've been stolen and robbed from God's people because of failures within those in the end of their life that restricted them passing the mantles on.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people actually kept the mantles to themselves and failed to disciple the next generation. And I think that includes, even people like Bob Jones and things like that. I don't think that those mantles were fully passed. And I think there are many others which I think were robbed and potentially need to be restored. So I think Christine wanted to talk about William Branham. Feel free if you want to share an engagement with William Branham as one of those cloud of witnesses. An interesting one for sure.
Well, I was just thinking of what you said, and that really struck a chord with me. What you just said about what's the name of that guy again? Who has reached millions?
Oh, Reinhard.
Reinhard, because the last conference I went for them, he already passed the baton to David. His last name. You know who I'm talking?
Yeah.
Well,
Daniel Kohada.
Daniel, thank you. See, I'm not very good at these names, am I? Right. So I'm not going to say he's passed it completely, but Daniel is pretty much predominantly running the ministry, and he sees him as his son. And I think I was always shocked at that, because he's not dead yet. He's still ministering, and not many men of God have that conviction of actually equipping the next generation, but also releasing the next generation. There's a real insecurity there, and intimidation. So that what you just shared has explained to me why he feels so free to be able to do that already. Yeah, but also what you said about Elijah passing it to Elisha, and the fact that there's so many mantles and that has not been passed. And I agree with that. I really agree with that. And I do think this is what is so significant about the cloud of witness, because when we went to court the other day, in the court of the upright, I close my eyes as I do and put my head back. Sometimes, I see things. Sometimes I find it difficult to concentrate if my children are around. But that particular day, I found myself in this is what I experience when I go to the court of upright. I see a lot of men and women. I don't see it as sex, in terms of gender when I see these things. But I see lots of people having conversations, like they're fellowshipping, chatting to each other. That's how I see it. And then as I was doing that, I was looking, because I was actually looking for William Branham in particular, because of a few different things that has happened to me that has made me realized that this guy definitely has stock in me, you know. So I was looking for him, and I was actually saying to myself, "But why are you looking? You don't even know what he looks like." That's what I was thinking to myself. But then all of a sudden, I saw a young, well, he doesn't, he's not an old man. He looked to me like a young man, about 5'6", 5'7". No, 5'7" is probably too tall. 5'6", he looks like my father's height, and I think my father's about 5'6". And smiled at me, and started walking towards me. And as he walked towards me, we sat down, and I said to him, I feel you have some stock in me," something like that. I said, you know. Um, I said, "These words of knowledge you used to get, where you just know in detail about people's illness, where they live, all these things. That's some of the. I don't think I am a word of knowledge kind of person. I didn't think so anyway. But recently, I'm getting some detailed words of knowledge that is actually blowing my mind." So I said to him, when I said that to him, he reminded me that I had been having these things already happening to me. Mine don't have anything to do with illness. Some of these things have actually saved my life, to be honest. Um, so he reminded me, and he said to me that, um, yeah, no, I can't remember the details. I wrote some of the things down. But anyway, he just put his hand on my head, and I literally felt, I don't even know how to explain that, but I literally felt like I shivered from head to toe. That's what it felt like to me. Um, and I think in my mind, when he started to talk to me about the words of knowledge I've been having recently, it made me go back to take those words of knowledge captive. Now, like I said, the words of knowledge I've been having has nothing to do with illnesses per se. Like recently, my husband, had an accident with one of the cars, one of the wheel on the car, and I went to bed one night, getting ready to go and speak somewhere the next day. And when I was lying in my bed, the Lord told me in detail that I thought my husband bought a new tire. The Lord said to me, your tires are not good for this trip, and said to me that the tire that my husband changed was actually the spare, so I have no spare for this trip. And and when pretty much, and gave me some instructions saying that in this trip that I'm going to take, I'm not to go over 60 miles an hour, and tomorrow morning he will tell me what to do regarding the tire, because the tire wasn't a good tire, he said. I woke up early that morning, so this is late at night, so I didn't ask my husband still what happened with the tire. And I woke up early that morning to get instructions as to what to do, and he said go to the petrol station and put air in. So when I went out, the same tire he was speaking to me about was actually flat. So I put air in them, and I didn't go over 60 miles. But if I went even 63 miles an hour, the car started to shake violently. It was ridiculous. Anyway, I went there, went to speak, came back, and then I asked my husband about what I'm telling you, and he said it's true. He said there's no spare, because that's the spare he used. He didn't buy a new tire, just like what the Lord said to me. And I'm sitting there going, are you serious? I mean, like details like that. And that's happened to me in terms of even like going to buy something, and Lord says to me, this is the amount, this is what happened, things that I don't know, and then I go and find out, and it's the exact same thing. But this is just like me lying in my bed. It's not something I'm trying to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So he was just what William was saying to me, was he was just reminding me of these things that I'm getting in detail, which are very personal to me, but in a few instances has actually saved my life. And he was just saying that it's already working. He said, like, what I understood was that he was just waiting for me to believe in the cloud of witness. Like the Lord is just waiting for me to believe, and I'm clearly now believing, because I was actually looking for him in this place. I was like, no, I need to find him, because I just know he has stock in me. I'm not sure about anybody else, but I know he has stock in me. There's something in this second half of the year. It's just been on my heart to what the strapline for the Christine Nelson Ministry is, revealing the Christ in you. And this second half of the year, I just felt the Lord said to me that he wanted me to press in even more so to become a revealer of Christ himself. So I've just really been allowing him to do his perfect work through me. And then this is how I knew that William Branham, even more so, that I wanted to meet William Branham, because I was listening to something and they said the guy who did his, whatever you do at funerals, said, do you realize that for the last, I think he said for the last 200 years, probably William Branham is the first person in a long time that has really been a revealer of Christ himself. Something like that, you know. Almost the exact words of what the Lord said to me for this second half. And that's when I said, no, 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 I really need to meet William. So, yeah, that's just my sharing. But I just thought I'd put it out there because I do feel that there are lots of mantles. Oh, I must say this as well. The day when, is it John Paul Jackson died, I can't describe really what I felt in the atmosphere, but I just really, really sensed so strong. That was the first time I'd ever sensed that. I really sensed that his mantle, whatever he carried, was not passed on, and it was looking for people who were willing to take on the mantle. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how you would even access it, but that is what I was sensing the entire time. And there was a sadness, but there was a real excitement as well about what could happen. I didn't feel like could only be for one person. I felt it could be for multiple of people, but for those who were mandated in that way, or do you understand?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think there are many mantles that have not been picked up. And, you know, we have a precedent, obviously, in the Word, and once the precedent's there, we need to take that precedent and use it. And I think many mantles weren't passed because of a refusal for someone to disciple somebody else. And that was the person didn't want to give their mantle away. So they wanted to keep control or keep authority up to the end. And I think that's also true. I don't believe God would want to pass a mantle to those that aren't going to use it correctly. So right now, you know, let's say someone like John Paul Jackson, who would receive that mantle? Well, most of the people who would have been involved with him and aren't operating in a new perspective. They're still operating in an old prophetic perspective. And I don't think God will want to give that mantle to people who are operating in an old perspective. So I think it's up to those who are operating in a new perspective to engage the cloud of witnesses to receive mantles and to go into Satan's trophy room and restore the mantles that were stolen and robbed by doing court cases on behalf of those who fell into sin or error at the end of their life. And William Branham was one of those. You know, there were a number of them that fell into error because of the lack of accountability and unwillingness to be in relationship at the end of their lives. And I think we want to make sure that those mantles are restored. And there are also a lot of people who were never acknowledged or could find a place within the church because of its religious systems, that the person then used their skills, gifts, and abilities in the world, because the church gave them no room and no place to be able to outwork their authority and their mantles, and therefore they went into the world. And some, in a sense, potentially, it could be the sort of the birth of New Age and other things, because the religious institution stopped people expressing the reality of their life, mantle, mandate, authority, and therefore they went off and put their effort into the world. I mean, years ago, one of the ones I remember reading about was Vincent van Gogh, who had a passion for the poor and evangelism and reaching out to those who were lost, and the church just rejected him. And all his creativity and everything else was then put into his art and everything else, and eventually he lost his mind because it was never going to be a fulfillment. Although he produced a lot of beautiful, interesting paintings, in a sense, some of them were of a tortured soul who was never fulfilled because the church rejected him. And I think there are many who have gone into the world and done some pretty amazing things, but God actually destined them to do that within the Christian community, and they rejected him. And I think there are also a lot of people who went off to pursue things in the world because of the money and everything else that it offered, and they never engaged to outwork that in the church. So there's a mixture of different things out there that are out there, and we just want to make sure that we equip and pass our things on to the next generation, and help them go further, and still be under them, supporting them in their going further. It doesn't mean we have to retire and give up when we pass a mantle of authority on. It just means we have an ongoing relationship in which we can continue to support and encourage and invest and minister to release people. And I think we just need a totally different view of how we do things. Because wouldn't it have been great if Moses had passed his mantle to Joshua, but had continued to actually do that? Rather than not being able to go with them into the promised land because of what he did. What happens if he would have gone in? Those are the type of things we need to actually see fulfilled. And sometimes, when you look at Moses and you look at someone like Moses, God used him powerfully, and he was a symbol of what people could have been if they'd embraced coming into intimacy with God themselves rather than sending someone on their behalf. So he's a picture of what happens when the church wants their leaders to do it for them rather than wants the leaders to equip them to do it. And you see that initially when he engaged to get water out of the rock. He was told to strike it, and water came out of the rock, and that was done with the elders. And then when God took the whole congregation to the rock, he was told to speak to it. And of course he didn't speak to it, he struck it. So he was trying to do something that was a new generational thing with everyone in the congregation, but he did it an old way. And that is what we must be careful of, that we don't try and do new things in an old way because we're familiar and comfortable with it, but we seek for new things. And I think when the men of white linen get involved, they will be encouraging us to outwork and do the things that we are called to do, but supporting and encouraging and getting alongside, and cheering us on, but way more than that. They have so much to impart, and actually sometimes God uses them as messengers, as well as the angelic realm. And I know when I first engaged with Jacob, it was a very, very significant encounter and series of encounters which actually shaped some of how I engage now, and some of my understanding of heaven and being a gateway and a house of God. All that came from engaging with Jacob. Now, people will say, well, why didn't God tell you himself? Well, he sent someone with a message. That's how God does it at times. Yes, sometimes God will sit me down and he'll talk to me and he'll give me a whole lot of direct revelation. And sometimes he'll do that through angels, he'll do that through Enoch, he'll do that through others in my own life. And it's not up to me to determine which one he's going to do, because he's God. He gets to decide which way he's going to communicate with me. I just have to make sure that I'm open to receive that communication and not reject it because of the messenger that it comes, or the form of message it comes with. In terms of Satan's trophy room, how do you go there? I've accessed it through Wisdom's Heights. I was given a seal to do it in a chancellor's role, and I went there to see it opened. I have, encouraged other people to go there. Make sure you have a mandate for what you're going for. I think sometimes we can observe things and see things because God wants to show us that they're there. But I think you do need a level of maturity and an understanding and authority to be able to do it. Wisdom's heights is where wisdom dwells, where there's 7 pillars of wisdom, where the way, where there's the door that go into the atmosphere, into the under the earth, into the stars. There's also a doorway that goes into Mount Zion to engage with the 7 spirits of God. Very interesting place. 7 pillars of wisdom you can engage in, go into, and you can actually find a process to help you establish and outwork, develop blueprints and mandates. Very interesting to engage with wisdom. So yeah, if you want to ask something about that.
Yeah, some time ago, again, this is long before I knew half of what we do now, I was studying the 7 spirits, and I got to the spirit of wisdom, and I said to the Lord in my language at the time that this one I want wisdom, And I went to sleep that day, and I had an encounter where I was in a room with my husband, and somebody was clearly coming up the stairs, and my husband looked through the door and said somebody's coming, and started to push back in a way. And suffice to say, despite me saying the person can't come because we're getting dressed, the door was literally pushed open. A very bright light came through, very, very bright light. I would say a brilliant white light. And a woman emerged out of the light. I can't discern if the woman was in a white suit or a silver suit, skirt suit, but she was certainly wearing something of that kind. I then heard the audible voice of the Lord from within me say, "This is the spirit of wisdom." She clearly heard what I said, what was said to me, because as soon as the voice said this to me, she smiled at me, and I fell, as in I was slain in the spirit. When I woke up that afternoon, my room was saturated with the presence of God. I mean, I don't think I couldn't come out of my bed for a good 30 minutes. It was completely saturated by the presence of God. The atmosphere had completely been taken over. And I know that after that visit, I had such acceleration in the prophetic. It was unbelievable in terms of words of knowledge, in terms of accuracy, details about people and their lives that I had never experienced before. This was my only encounter with wisdom. I shared that to say pretty much, I always feel that whatever I've experienced, I can go back to that because that's the principle I see in Scripture. So because I know I've met wisdom, I guess my question is, can I ask her to take me to Wisdom Heights and to bring me to Satan's trophy room?
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, you can. I mean, there is the difference between the spirit of wisdom, part of the 7 spirits of God, and wisdom herself. Wisdom, as in Proverbs 8:9, was the first created being. Before any other things were created, wisdom was created first. And wisdom saw everything subsequently that was created. So wisdom has a very special place within God's economy and governmental position, if you like. And the spirit of wisdom is also sort of female and carries with that a wisdom perspective, and is very much involved in helping us equip us for our position of heavenly government, as are all the 7 spirits of God. They're all engaged with our position. Wisdom herself is of another order, and Proverbs 8, Proverbs 9 describe her. Proverbs 8 describes her calling to the sons of men to come so that she can equip us for government. And it talks about equipping kings and princes and nobles and rulers in government. So for me, my experience with wisdom is very much being about teaching me, helping me understand the courts of heaven, the protocols of heaven, whereas the spirit of wisdom is about my position and helping me understand my position and bringing me into a revelation of what my position is so I can be equipped for that position. Wisdom herself has certainly engaged me, taught me how to use the different courts, engaged with me in many different areas around that. So you can definitely pursue wisdom because she's calling. You know, wisdom often has several other angelic beings who are with her. There's the wisdom's handmaidens that's described. There are the 7 pillars of wisdom that are there. Very interesting description of wisdom's heights that open up all sorts of understandings. And wisdom herself you can pursue, and she can definitely authorize you to do certain things, and certainly help me. Sometimes she's given me, she gave me a chancellor's seal, she gave me a staff, she gave me various things. She took me to see how the chancellor's houses work and all that type of thing. So I spent quite a lot of my learning engaging with wisdom. Because she can certainly help you with Satan's trophy room, that's for sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. All right. Anyone else got anything they want to ask? Share.
Mike, can I just quickly share a dream I had last night? It was a bit
Sure.
strange. So I won't go into all of it, but just to say that someone appeared to me who was part of key relationships that I used to have in the old order, who has now moved on and not become part of the new order to my knowledge. But she appeared in this dream last night, or this morning actually, and she was standing inside a metal gate, which I've seen before, and I was standing with her. And because she'd been part of the old order, I asked her permission to do something. And she said, no, you can't do that. And she then walked through the gate. But she walked through the gate. And I realised that actually she was operating, this is a human being who was operating at a, or at least in the dream, was operating at a level that of walking through walls, the equivalent of walking through a wall. And I asked her about it, and she said she hadn't told anyone except the people of the old order that she was still with. And I didn't really know what to do with that. I was a bit puzzled by it, and I've been saying to the Lord, I don't want my feelings or my thinking to affect my interpretation of the dream. I want it by revelation, but it just seemed really odd to me that someone who has no conception of anything, at least much to my understanding, has no conception of what God's doing with people engaging with God in this way and so forth, would actually just walk through the wall. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that. It's a bit...
Well, I mean, some of the things like that, it depends really what the symbolism is.
Yeah.
You know, and someone walking through a wall or walking through a gate and not opening the gate could be an indication that they've forced their way into something that wasn't open to them, rather than that was a supernatural thing that they were able to do. It could be the opposite, in that they actually were forcing something from a natural realm that should have been opened in the spiritual realm, and therefore they're doing things in a wrong order, and that's why they said no to you.
Okay.
You know, and now it's really whether this either is an invitation for you to start legislating or administrating into that person, calling them, maybe sending angels to them, maybe, you know, calling for an Emmaus road, an unveiling. You know, that's something you obviously need to seek God about.
Yeah.
You know, why did He give it to you?
Yeah.
Could have been a warning, or showing you, you know, what certain people are doing from an earthly perspective, but it also could be, okay, is this something that He wants you to pursue and, you know, engage? And is this woman just a symbol of many other people that you have had connection with? And, you know, God wants you to maybe take some authority and start to do something with that group who were represented by this woman,
Yeah.
in a sense, so that they can be reached.
Yeah.
You know, so they can cross over and engage in the new,
Yeah.
you know, type of things. So yeah,
Okay.
potentially lots of different things there to go back to God with.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just, it's because it's all tied up with a kind of emotional past. I don't want my feelings or my thinking to affect how I interpret it. I just was, yeah. But actually, the first thing you said about forcing something actually really resonated with me. So, yeah. And yeah, okay. So I can see something coming out of that. So thank you. That's really, really helpful.
Okay, okay, no problem. All right, all right, okay, all right, okay. Well, we'll leave it there.